Good morning, everyone, and happy Tuesday. My name is Nick Marro with Occupy Fantasy. As always, I'm here to help you break down tonight's MLB DFS main slates on both DraftKings and FanDuel. I'm going to go through each game, highlight whether or not I like the arms. We'll talk through the top stacks. At the end, I'll kind of give a slate overview of everything I like. But as we go through the video, I'll be using the Occupy model, which you see here. If you haven't already, please like the video. Also, subscribe to the channel. That helps us get more free content like this out to you on a regular basis. Additionally, if you're not a member of Occupy Fantasy, check the links in the description below. As a member, you get access to the model you see here, which I'll be using throughout the video. We also have a single lineup builder, multi lineup builder, and a private Discord server full of DFS pros to help you improve your game. Then for MLB, we also have the daily plug article highlighting our favorite pitchers, stacks, and batters, of which I'm a contributor. We've been really hitting our stride lately. This is the best time of year, in my opinion, to play MLB. We have enough data now to really build opinions off of. The weather's getting warmer, balls are flying. So yeah, really a lot to look forward to these next couple months. But yeah, we got a massive 13 game slate today. I always try to keep things under a half an hour. Sometimes it's tough. Today kind of feels like one of those days. We don't yet have ownership in the model. I'm going to refresh right now. That should populate any minute, but yeah, I can still go through without it. It's not a major deal. Um, but yeah, let's get into the slate now. Like I said, 13 games, a lot to get through here. So first game on the slate, we have the Cleveland Guardians heading to Baltimore to take on Kyle Gibson. Cal Quantrill on the mound for Cleveland. So as always, if you guys see me looking off to the side, it's because I have multiple monitors open. I want to give you as much information as possible in terms of statistics, lineups, and which plays we'll be targeting, everything like that. And I do have my notepad file open as always. As we talk through this, I will keep note of which pitchers and stacks I think are worth prioritizing, and then at the end I'll give kind of a summary. So let's get into this now. Yeah, so I actually like this spot. Let's pull up stacks first. Sorting by OF index. I thought we'd see Baltimore a little higher up. Where are they? Yeah, they're kind of down there. I mean, they're top 10 in team total. The thing is, they're facing Cal Quantrill, who hasn't been terrible on the surface, but when you look at his numbers a little deeper, 5.74 xFIP, allowing a 184 ISO to lefties, and the Orioles do have a lot of left-handed power. So if you're looking for one-off bats, maybe go to someone like Santander, Rushman. Gunnar Henderson seems to finally be coming around a little bit after a really slow start to the season. If Adam Frazier's leading off, he's another bat you can consider. But it was so low in the model. I mean, we got to go off the model, honestly. I'm not going to get too heavy on Orioles here. They do have some upside, though, as is evident by that top 10 team total. But on a massive slate like this, we really want to kind of focus our scope and hone in on the top stacks. So I like Baltimore enough to not even consider playing Quantrill here. But that being said, I don't really think that they're a priority. On the other side of things, we have Kyle Gibson facing these Cleveland Guardians. Gibson's actually been pretty solid lately. I was looking into his numbers earlier this morning, and yeah, where is he in the model here? Kind of towards the bottom. Not really surprised by that. A little bit overpriced, especially on FanDuel where he's 8,900. So Gibson's been getting good results. The issue with him is that the K rate isn't really there. Only a 16.2% K rate on the season, which is well below his career average. Only a 9% swinging strike rate. So even if he has a good game here against a Guardians team that doesn't K all that much against right-handed pitching, I just don't think we can really rely on him for upside. So I'm not all that interested in Gibson. But that being said, I'm really not that interested in the Cleveland Bats either. So in summary, there's just not much from this game we really have to target. Moving into the next game on the slate now, we have the Milwaukee Brewers with Adrian Hauser on the mound facing off against Yusei Kikuchi in Toronto and those Toronto Blue Jays. So this is an interesting one. I mean, we see Kikuchi up here. Um, a little bit higher up than I expected. Adrian Hauser is always dirt cheap, but not very appealing matchup for him facing off against the Blue Jays. Taking a quick look at the stack page, I did expect we'd see Toronto a bit higher. Where, man, yeah, that's a lot lower than I expect. Only a six ranked team total, and everything else is kind of in the 20s. So yeah, I'm not crazy about stacking against Hauser. He does have a 3.88 xFIP, but at the same time, he doesn't miss many bats. And these Blue Jays, time and time again, tend to put up numbers against pitchers that don't record strikeouts. So I do like some Blue Jays here. Obviously, not enough to consider them a top stack, though. And then as for Milwaukee, they're way up there, at least high enough that I think they're worth talking about. So Yusei Kikuchi, obviously pretty high upside as a pitcher, also very volatile, has a lot of power. His K rate's down a bit this year, but he's allowing a 300 ISO to lefties, 238 to righties. So there's a lot of power coming in whenever Kikuchi's on the mound. So if we pull up Milwaukee here, this is the first stack I'll actually talk through on the batters page. No surprises, the righties that are popping towards the top in terms of OF index. We got Contreras, Taylor, Ruff, Brousseau. Just keep in mind with guys like Ruff and Brousseau, those two especially, they're definitely pinch hit risks. They're dirt cheap. It makes it very easy to afford them as a stack, but there is always risk that if they can chase Kikuchi early, those two would be pulled for lefties. So just keep an eye on that. That's Ruff and Brousseau. But at the same time, I mean, we got five guys here with an ISO over 190. So Weimer, Brousseau, Ruff, Taylor, Contreras all look really solid. I like Brian Anderson a lot here as well. Owen Miller leading off. Anderson historically hits lefties well. Numbers really haven't been that great this season, but 179 ISO against lefties isn't bad. And then Owen Miller, very cheap as a leadoff hitter. I don't mind him there either. So I'll go ahead. I got my top stacks list on my other monitor here. I'm going to go ahead and jot down the Brewers. I do like their upside here against Kikuchi, and I can't imagine they're going to be very popular given the four-ish implied team total. Not necessarily a top priority for me. Obviously, with those pitch hit risks in there and stuff, I get too excited about them, but I do think they're worth talking about. And again, I do not mind Blue Jays bats here, but Hauser usually does a decent job limiting damage. They are going to be pretty popular with their team total over five, but I actually prefer the Brewers side at lower ownership, and I really have no interest in either pitcher. Moving into the next game on the slate now, we have the Cincinnati Reds taking on the Boston Red Sox. Ben Lively on the mound for Cincinnati, taking on Brayan Bello for Boston. So this is an interesting matchup here, especially on the Bello side. But let's talk through the Boston bats first. So Lively comes in. He's actually had pretty good numbers to this point on the season. We're looking at a 336 xFIP, 27% K rate, which is actually really impressive. The thing is, he's only faced like 65, 70 batters, so it's a very small sample size. I don't know that we could too deeply into those numbers. And the Red Sox, yeah, they're still a tough offense, even though they've had their struggles at times early in the season. Um, Ranking eighth in OF index, a little bit higher on the slate. Obviously, I think it might be the Marlins who are top, but yeah, we don't need to talk about the 640 games. But yeah, I do actually like Boston here. If you are going to Boston, I would target the lefties. Verdugo, Yoshida, Devers, Duran. That's probably the top four bats here. I mean, I'll just double check to make sure. But yeah, Lively allowing a 180 ISO to lefties so far. So as good as he's been, that's where he's been. I don't know. That's his Achilles heel, so to speak. And we see the team total climbing over six here for Boston. Devers obviously one of the top bats on the slate, followed by Yoshida, like I said, Verdugo, Duran. Valdez there as well as a very cheap lefty bat with a near 200 ISO against right-handed pitching so far this season. So in so many words, I do really like the Boston Red Sox here. I think people will maybe shy away from them um, just because Lively hasn't been terrible. But that being said, personally, I like them a lot. And if that total is going to be pushing 6 runs, I think it's around 5-5 in Vegas right now. I think, yeah, they're going to draw ownership. And on a 13-game slate, I can't imagine they're super chalky, but they are one of my preferred stacks for sure. On the other side of things, we have these red bats against Bello. For me personally, I'm a little bit surprised Bello isn't higher in the model as things stand. Very talented young arm, shows a lot of K upside. I mean, statistically, he hasn't really been there yet, but just seeing the kind of stuff this kid has, I do expect he's going to start to turn in better results. And while this Reds offense does have some pop, they also K nearly 26% of the time against right-handed pitching. So Bello, for me, one of my favorite value arms on the slate. I will say he definitely comes with some risk. Um, but yeah, for me personally, that's the type of play I like to play in large field tournaments. He's going to be cheap. He's going to be relatively low owned. I hope we're still waiting on ownership. I'll do a quick refresh here to see if we have it. But this is the type of guy who can post a big outlier game. He can put up a really big score. And that could be the difference if you're playing a chalkier SP1 or you're playing a chalkier stack over on DK. Or if you're playing other heavily owned pieces over on FanDuel. So for me, I like Bello here. I like Boston bats. Definitely favor the left-handed hitters for Boston, but this is a definite game I'm going to be honing in on a little bit. Moving into the next game on the slate now, we have the Phillies and Ranger Suarez taking on Kodai Senga and the New York Mets. So the Mets, I imagine, are going to profile pretty well here. Um, I mean, man, I'm off on my guessing this morning. But yeah, we see the Mets way down there at 28th. That's pretty shocking to me because Suarez has not been very good. If we look into Suarez's numbers so far this season, just pulling them up. Yeah, I mean the xFIP is low, 347, but he's allowing a 250 ISO to lefties, 240 to righties. It's a very small sample size. But yeah, I could see maybe getting to some Mets here. Not going to call them a priority or dig into bats. Pete Alonso's on fire right now. Lindor's been hitting the ball well. Those two in the middle of the order are great. And Francisco Alvarez, he's finally hitting towards the top of the order. He's been crushing the ball lately. Those are the three bats I focus in on for Mets if you do want to stack against Suarez. But they're not a top stack, so we don't need to go too deep into that. Um, but yeah, I'm certainly not playing Ranger Suarez by any stretch. On the other side of things, Senga, I mean, the upside's there. He has been rounding into form. The issue with him has been the walks. He's taking on a Phillies team that has around an 11% walk rate for their starters, which is actually pretty solid. But they also have a 175 ISO, which is a little bit dangerous. But all that being said, I think his ownership will be fairly low. We're getting him sub 10K. He does have K upside. So in large field tournaments, Senga, not a crazy play by any stretch. I think I could see getting to him if you're playing a bunch of lineups. He wouldn't be in one of my first one, two, or even three if I'm three maxing. But I do like Senga as a tournament play. He has flashed that ceiling, and whenever you could get a player with that type of upside and low ownership, there's certainly merit to that. But again, we got to keep an eye on the model throughout the day. It's still waiting on ownership to come in. So just to recap there, no priorities, but Senga's kind of borderline. I do think he's an arm worth considering, and the Mets bats do look decent, even though the model's not agreeing yet. Keep an eye on that. I wouldn't be surprised to see that climb throughout the day. That is the Mets OF index rating. Looking at the next game on the slate now, we have the Kansas City Royals taking on the St. Louis Cardinals. Zach Greinke on the bump against Miles Mikolas. So a couple vet righties here. Pretty ugly matchup as far as pitching goes. I mean, Mikolas hasn't been terrible, but the issue with him, not a ton of K upside, 17% K rate's very low, under a 7% swinging strike rate's just terrible. So I actually think Mikolas can limit the damage here. It's just you're not going to get a very high ceiling, so it's tough to want to stomach him when he's in the same range of other high upside guys like who are we talking about here? Bello, um, Belock, Gibson, like these are all guys that are tough to trust. I think Nicholas has a higher floor than all of them, but at the same time, I think he's a lower ceiling. So in large field tournaments, probably won't get to much of him. If you're playing something single entry or small field though, lower risk contest, maybe get to Nicholas. But for me personally, just not the type of player I'm usually targeting in DFS where we're looking for upside. But yeah, I can see him limiting damage here. Not going to be rushing to play Royals bats. I can't imagine they're too high in the model. Yeah, somewhere middle of the road. On the other side of things, though, we have Zach Greinke taking on the Cardinals. So Greinke has not been terrible. He's still pushing a 5x FIP dating back to the start of last season. Not allowing a ton of power, but he has been hit consistently. His K rate's down around 14%. The Cardinals' offense much better against left-handed pitching, so this isn't an outstanding matchup by any stretch. But that being said, I think there is some merit to playing Cardinals bats here. Um, it's just they're expensive right now, especially on FanDuel. I think the Jong, I mean, was up around 3,800 when I last looked. You're just not getting any discounts on this team as a stack. So while I do like them here, Greggy's done a half decent job limiting damage. I would consider the Cardinals, and I would consider Mikolas in this game, but it's tough for me to really call either a priority. Moving into the next game on the slate now, we have the Tampa Bay Rays, and Shane McClanahan taking on Kyle Hendricks and the Chicago Cubs. Um, Excuse me. This is one you're going to want to keep an eye on the wind. Obviously, Wrigley, the wind affects the game environment more than any other stadium in baseball. And what do you know? We have the Rays here as a top stack. So if the wind's going to be blowing in hard, I expect they come down the list a little bit. It looks like the team total's been climbing though, so that's something I want to keep an eye on. But let's pull up the numbers. It's interesting. I do like the Rays here. I do think they're good, but if the wind's blowing in, I think Hendricks is getting a bit disrespected in the model because we don't have a ton of data on him because he's working his way back from an injury. And we saw Tampa really struggle yesterday against Stroman. And obviously, I do think Stroman's better. than a Kyle Hendricks, but I don't know that I'm super excited to rush to raise bats here. So Hendricks, dating back to the start of last season, 5 xFIP, allowing a 273 ISO to lefties. This season so far, not enough data to really gather anything there. But if you are going to play Hendricks or play against Hendricks, rather, I would target the lefties. I mean, I think we have to get to some race here. The interesting thing, like I said, and I don't mean to be redundant, really is that window. That could be the difference between the Rays being a top stack or being kind of a middle of the road stack. But again, Hendricks allowing a 270 ISO to lefties dating back to the start of last season. So guys like Franco, Josh Lowe. Let me sort by off index. We already are. Brandon Lowe looks good there. And then, I mean, a couple of the righties are profiling well here as well. Not really surprised to see Diaz or Rosarina towards the top, but keep an eye on the lineup. I think we see Walls in there against the lefty. We have him in the model right now. Lowe, Franco, both lows, hopefully. And yeah, the Rays look good. Just keep an eye on the wind for sure, because if it is blowing in hard, we could see a situation like yesterday where it's just a pitcher's paradise. So for now, I like the Rays a lot. Favor the left-handed hitters slightly, but at the same time, we got to keep an eye on that wind. On the other side of things, we have maybe the best pitcher on the slate. I imagine he's going to pop as the top OF index play. Oh, he's right up there with Gilbert. Run another refresh. I would love to get ownership in while we're recording this video. But while I do that, let's pull up Shane McClanahan's stats on the other monitor. Still no ownership yet. So his xFIP's up a bit this season, 3.9, but 29% K rate, 16% swinging strike rate. So as high as that K rate is, I expect we can see it continue to climb. The Cubs are actually good against left-handed pitching. They have a 200 ISO, 360 WOBA. They rolled out a terrible lineup yesterday. I think we see more of their normal starters today, but maybe they rest a couple guys again who actually went out yesterday, like a Swanson or a Suzuki, something like that. But if they are at full health, there's a ton of upside here for McClanahan. And again, keep an eye on that wind. If it's blowing out, obviously that hurts his upside. But if it's blowing in, I would make a pretty strong argument that he's the top arm on the slate. Again, 16% swinging strike rate is outstanding. I think he's the top K per IP on the board. Yep, 1.37 K per IP. So Shane McClanahan, one of the best arms on the slate. I had him open on the start screen when we started the video, so no surprise there. Really one of the best plays. He's going to be very popular, though. As soon as we get ownership, I expect we see McClanahan as the chalk SP1 on both sites, but we'll keep an eye on that for sure. Moving into the next game now, we have Joe Ryan and the Minnesota Twins taking on Brandon Belock and the Houston Astros. So another situation we're going to be looking at pitching. I do really like Joe Ryan, even against this Houston team. Ryan, 369 xFIP on the season, 28% K rate, 40% swing strike rate. Really, really solid numbers. The Astros got Altuve back a couple weeks ago. They're as healthy as they've been all season. It seems like a Braves finally hitting the ball a little bit. But again, just not a good matchup. I would rather play Joe Ryan. We have him popping as one of the top OF index plays. There he is at number 3, tied with Zach Gallen. So no surprise there. Uh, and then, yeah, like I said, I have no interest in Houston bats. I really do like Joe Ryan here, especially if he's going to be low owned. Keep an eye on that ownership. I think against Houston, the matchup will be enough to scare a lot of people away. But for me in tournaments, I like his upside. He could certainly match McClanahan or Gilbert. On the other side of things, Brandon Belock, I recommended him on a video a couple weeks ago. He had a career start. I didn't think he'd even do that good, but he's an underrated arm. The issue is this is a terrible matchup for him. Minnesota has a lot of power, 210 ISO against righties this season. They do offer plenty of K upside, but at the same time, it's just really tough to want to click. Priced at 8K on FanDuel, 6,800 on DK is a little bit tempting. If I'm playing 150 lineups, maybe I mix him in as an SP2 just because he does have some talent. But it's just really, really tough for me to want to trust him here. This Twins offense is as healthy as they've been all season. They just got prospect Julian back. I mean, Gallo, Julian, Crane, Buxton, Kirilloff. That's just a really talented batting order. And I won't be surprised if they're popping in the model. Not at the top, but they are getting some love. Ranking top 10 in WOBA, 14 in OF index rank. So they're kind of middle of the road. I would rather play Twins bats today than play B-Lock, and that's just someone who likes B-Lock, but at the same time, neither are priorities. The priorities here are, or the priority here is Joe Ryan. That's the one piece I'm really interested in. Moving into the next game on the slate now, we have Tyler Anderson and the Los Angeles Angels taking on Lucas Giolito And the White Sox. So, like the rest of the team, Giolito's been super inconsistent. I mean, he has upside for sure, but we've also seen him implode on occasion. So he's a really tough pitcher to get a read on. I'll go ahead. I know I haven't been pulling up many game logs or using the actual sites here, but I would like to see what he's been up to recently. Um, yeah, I imagine wide range of outcomes. I mean, we see some big games in here against Kansas City, Minnesota, pretty pedestrian performances against Houston and Detroit, and then a decent game against KC. But last time out, he's really struggled against the Tigers. Um, let's see here. I mean, the Angels are one of the better stacks. I think you are trying to capture that bad day for Giolito if you do go there, and I do think it's possible. This is one of the weird instances where I could make an argument for the pitcher. I could also make a pretty strong argument for the stack. Personally, I lean with the stack today. We see them ranking sixth in ISO, OFNX rating. I imagine that team total will continue to climb. It's already climbed half a run since the line opened, so just something to keep an eye on there. But again, Giolito obviously has some upside, but the 490 XFIP suggests he's due for continued regression. He's really struggled against lefties. I'll go ahead and pull up the batters page, but we have Moniak towards the top of the order. I know a lot of guys in the Discord have been enjoying playing him. Very cheap leadoff hitter. Ton of power against righties. He's been really fun to watch. And then Otani, obviously from the left side. Trout is matchup proof. Those are your top three bats. No surprise there. Before I even look down, and then Hunter Renfro, 240 ISO against righties this season. Drury's up there. Walsh getting healthy. Doesn't look great right now, but he's dirt cheap. So if you need to lower the price of the stack to fit Otani and Trout, Walsh does make that easier to do. So I'm going to go ahead and write down the Angels. I like them here. I do slightly favor the lefties, but obviously play Mike Trout too. um, and yeah, Giolito, he is capable of a good game, but this is not the type of slate where I think we want to play with fire like that. So clicking over to the Chicago side of things, it's taking a while to load. But yeah, Tyler Anderson has been absolutely terrible, and the White Sox have also been terrible. So it's kind of the opposite of when like a unstoppable force meets an immovable object. It's like what happens when a stoppable force meets a very movable object? I mean, personally, I like Anderson here. Just kidding. I mean, I'm just reading his name. I didn't mean to say that out loud. I like the White Sox bats here. Let me correct myself. So as bad as they've been and as inconsistent as they've been, they actually have a 200 ISO against lefties this season. Anderson 645 xFIP, allowing a 224 ISO to righties. The White Sox are a very sneaky stack here with a ton of upside. So I completely misspoke. I hate Tyler Anderson here. Would never consider playing him. I really, really like White Sox bats. So Louis Robert, he's the top one here. ISO pushing 300 against lefties. Tim Anderson hasn't been great, but he's getting on base, which is fine if you're using him as a stack piece. Moncada, usually terrible against lefties. Probably would skip him, but yeah, I do like Vaughn, Grandal, Jake Berger, and Clint Frazier towards the bottom of the order. Both going to be cheap here, and they have massive, massive upside against lefties. So I people always like to ask, what's a real solid contrarian stack that you think will be low owned that you really like in tournaments? For me today, that's probably the White Sox. I really do like the White Sox. I just think Tyler Anderson. I don't know what's wrong with him. I never thought he was good, but he's worse than terrible right now. So I'm gonna get to some White Sox bats for sure. But yeah, that is all from that game. Moving into the next game now. We have the Colorado Rockies taking on the Arizona Diamondbacks. Kyle Freeland on the bump for Colorado. Zach Allen on the bump for Arizona. So I do imagine we see Gallen as one of the top arms. No surprise there. Really solid 1.15K per IP. He's expensive on both sides at 10.7, but this Colorado lineup isn't great. Obviously, they're even worse away from cores than they are in cores. No surprise there. But yeah, Gallen, 337 xip on the season, 27.8% K rate, holding both righties and lefties to a sub 260 WOBA. I like him. I think he's really solid. I want to keep an eye on that ownership. I'll give it another refresh here. But if he's going to be much lower owned than guys like McClanahan, Gilbert, or Ryan, I mean, I want to look at all four of those arms and kind of see where the ownership falls. But I expect we see Gallen kind of reasonably owned. If he's not, if he's more popular than McClanahan, I'd rather just find the 500, 600 for McClanahan. But if Gallen's going to be lower owned, he's one of my favorite GPP arms on the slate. We got to wait and see. It's tough to read. We're getting a little bit of a discount in the better matchup against Colorado. But if the wind's blowing hard in Chicago again, I do expect we see Shane become the chalk. So I love Zach Allen, would not consider any Rocky bats. On the other side of things, I mean, Kyle Freeland hasn't been great. He does an okay job limiting damage, allowing a 200 ISO to right-handed hitters, though. So if you want to play some righties tonight, I certainly think there's merit to that. Arizona's been putting up big scores night to night. Um, just a lot of power on both sides of the plate. And let's sort by ISO here. I know they have a crazy number. Yeah, five guys over 200 ISO in this lineup. Marte, Longoria, McCarthy, Rivera, Walker all look outstanding. Marte got the day off yesterday, so he should be in leading off. Gurriel as well. He hasn't been great against lefties, but I'd be fine playing him here, even though the model doesn't love him. But the D-backs are one of the better stacks on the slate. Again, Freeland, 200 ISO allowed, two right-handed hitters, and the D-backs have a 190 ISO as a team against lefties, at least for their projected starting lineup. So looking at the stack page again, ranking fourth in OF Index, ISO, and WOBA, third in team total, one of the best stacks on the slate. I know this ownership number is wrong. It looks like they're going to be super, super popular, though. So just keep an eye on that. If you do go with D-backs and they are one of the chalkier stacks on the slate, you're going to have to get a little bit creative with your arms. But all that being said, I do like them here. One of the top stacks on the board for sure. We'll have no Kyle Freeland, and Zach Allen is also solid. Next game on the slate, we have Bryce Elder and the Atlanta Braves against JP Sears and the Oakland A's. This one's tricky. I have not been too high on Elder, but he continues to put up massive scores. I'm not sure if it's an anomaly. I'm not sure if we're going to see the regression, but he's in an excellent spot here against the A's. So 3.8 xFIP on the season, 21% K rate, just a 10% swinging strike rate. Hasn't been allowing much power though. He's done a good job keeping the ball in the ballpark. So I think he's fine here. I just don't think he has the K upside to really justify that 10-4 price tag on FanDuel or even the 9,300 on DK. So it's a great matchup, don't get me wrong. The A's K nearly 25% of the time against righties, but I just think Elder's a little overrated. If you're seeing him in single digit ownership, though, he's going to be a solid tournament play. But for me personally, he's someone I'd maybe be looking to get away from. Not really going to be looking to stack Oakland, though, so I would rather play Elder than Oakland. So all that trash talking I'm going on Elder, this is an outstanding matchup. So there's certainly merit to playing him regardless of how I feel about him personally. On the other side of things, we have JP Sears, one of the more enigmatic uh, pitchers in baseball. This guy has a lot of K upside, but it's kind of inconsistent. And then at the same time, he allows a lot of power, but we have seen him put up massive fantasy scores. For me personally, I won't be playing any Sears tonight. I'd much rather be getting to Braves bats, obviously, and we see that reflected in the model here. So the Braves, third in OF index, first in ISO, fifth in WOBA, fourth in team total. Sears allowing a 274 ISO, two right-handed hitters. And this Braves lineup has a ridiculous, and this is ridiculous, 300 ISO against lefties this season. So the Braves are one of the best stacks on the slate. There have been slates where we've stacked against Sears where he's let us down. But yeah, they're just outstanding here. I really like them a lot. I'd be honing in on Riley, Murphy, Ozuna, Acuna, all those righties. Olson is obviously matchup proof, but I would favor the right-handed bats here. Maybe we get a very cheap Kevin Pillar towards the bottom of the order. He'd be a decent piece of value, but if I could only pick four Braves, it's probably going to be Acuna, Riley, Murphy, Ozuna. Also really like Albies, Arcia, all the righties look great here. So I don't mind Olson. He's going to be lower owned, but I would really hone in on the righties. The Braves are one of the best stacks on the slate, but that is not surprising at all. All right, two more games here. We got Pittsburgh and a Johan Oviedo against San Francisco Giants with Brebbia opening for Sean Manaea. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. Pretty straightforward to me. I really don't have much interest in either pitcher. Manaea, 4.77 xFIP on the season, allowing a ton of power to both sides. He is coming in after the opener, though, so I do think Pittsburgh bats are viable. Oviedo, pretty inconsistent, but he's had some struggles with left-handed hitting, so I could see maybe getting to some lefties here. I'm not going to call them a priority, but I would rather play the bats than the arm. So San Francisco, we see popping kind of towards the middle of the model. Don't mind them here. Not going to call them a priority. Pittsburgh, a lot lower than I expected. But yeah, they do have a very low team total. If you see that climb throughout the day, maybe you get to some Pittsburgh bats as a very low owned stack. But as things stand, there's really nothing from that game to prioritize. All right, final game on the slate now. We have Jake Irvin and the Washington Nationals taking on Tony Gonsolin and the Dodgers. So yeah, Gonsolin, decent arm. He's been slow to be stretched out though. And yeah, he just really hasn't been himself yet this season. 5.61 xFIP across a very small sample size, dating back to the start of last year. 4.4 xFIP, not allowing much power, but he's also usually on a short leash via Dave Roberts. So I'm not going to be playing much Gosselin tonight. I don't imagine many will. Let me just take a quick look at that. Yeah, I don't see him towards the top of the model, so I'm not going to dig too deep into that one. Nationals bats are okay, certainly not a priority though. On the other side of things, though, I do think we have to prioritize some of these Dodgers. Jake Irvin, I think his first name's Jake, but yeah, Irvin for the Nationals has been mostly terrible. 5.92 xFIP across a small sample size, allowing a ton of power to lefties. 250 ISO allowed to lefties. So Freeman, Muncy, Hayward are going to be priorities here. Obviously, Betts is pretty much matchup proof. Will Smith looks great as well. But yeah, Betts, I mean, he looks good against everyone. I put him on the cover for a reason. I think he profiles as one of the best bats on the entire slate. Sorting by OF index, it sounds like Max Muncy will be back tonight too. He's been banged up. So you get Betts, Muncy, Smith, Freeman. That's an outstanding four-man stack if you could afford it. Probably get a pay down in pitching though. Then JD, Vargas, Hayward, Peralta. Those cheap lefty outfielders, Peralta and Hayward, certainly help lower the price of the stack and make them more affordable. So I really like the Dodgers here for sure. Going to be favoring the left-handed hitters. All right, so clicking back over to the pitcher model. Uh, did I miss a game? What about the Yankees against the Mariners? Oh, I skipped the Yankees and Mariners. Excuse me. Let me go back to that one, which is funny because I'm actually a Yankees fan, as many of you know. Um, let's take a look here. I know Nestor's on the bump for New York, taking on Logan Gilbert and the Mariners. Pretty surprising I missed this one. Yeah, so checking the model for bats first. Seattle hits lefties well, but they're not going to profile all that well in this spot. And then the Yankees obviously have a ton of power, but Gilbert's a super talented arm. I don't have any interest in Nestor here personally. Um, the Mariners do strike out a lot against lefties, but Nestor does allow power. All it's going to take is a couple walks and a home run for him to struggle to hit value at that price. He is GPP viable, don't get me wrong, but as a fan of this guy and as a fan of this team, this is the type of matchup I'm not really rushing to play him in. If you're playing a ton of lineups and he's low owned, it certainly makes some sense, but for me, he's not a priority. On the other side of things, though, Logan Gilbert, 3.19 extra around a 30% K rate. This Yankees offense has been hitting the ball well. So I do like him in tournaments. I do think he has upside, but I think McClanahan and Gallen are the safer plays. So keep an eye on that ownership. If Gilbert's lower owned than the others, I will like him more. But as things stand, I think I'd rather play McClanahan or Gallen. But we're comparing the top arms on the slate, so do not sleep on Logan Gilbert. All right, I'm glad to bring that back around. Let me pull up my list here. Top stacks, we really like the Rays tonight. Definitely favor the lefties. The Braves look good. Favor the righties. Dodgers favor the lefties. White Sox, one of my favorite sneaky stacks on the slate. Trying to remember who they're facing. Um, yeah, Tyler Anderson, who's been absolutely terrible. So the White Sox, one of my favorite GPP plays. We have Milwaukee, who looks decent here. Boston definitely favor the lefties. Angels against Giolito, who's been struggling, favor the left-handed hitters there as well. And then the D-backs, who've been tearing the cover off the ball, just an outstanding play. McClanahan, Gallen, Gilbert, your top three arms. Keep an eye on ownership. Just probably play the lowest owned guys in tournaments, but at the same time, I think McClanahan is probably the safest, followed by Gallen, then Gilbert. Bray and Bello, the model doesn't really love him, but he's one of my favorite value options tonight. Joe Ryan looks good. I imagine his ownership will be lower than the top three I talked about, but you could put him in that group. Then Kodai Senga in tournaments looks really solid there. Bryce Elder, I'm not a big fan, but he has flashed serious upside. And while I said I don't like Nestor, I mean, we really have no value on this slate, so if we're getting him under 9K, I'll add him as well. So once again, my name's Nick Marro. If you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate you tuning in this morning. A massive, massive slate tonight. Lots of money to be made. Let's have fun, everyone. Like, subscribe, sign up to Occupy. Follow me on Twitter at Nick Marro DFS. Take care. Make some money.